Hey, what's up guys, DarkArmedDuelist, and today doing a branded Despia deck profile. So I'm really excited for you guys because you guys have been requesting this one a lot recently down in the comments, and this deck is hands down the best deck of the format. This deck is super fun to play, especially with all the new cards we got out of the Albaz Strike structure deck, and I'm really excited to show you guys my list. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of our notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name inscription in every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting a requested deck profile every single month you're a patron, along with test stands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're gonna be playing 3 copies of Aluber Jester of Despia. This card is absolutely insane, and thank goodness this card is getting a reprint in Ghost from the past too. It has a really awesome search effect that if this card is normal or special summon, you can add a branded spell or trap from your deck to your hand, which is usually going to be branded fusion. This card also has the ability if a face-up fusion monster you control is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, while this card is in your graveyard, then you can target an effect monster your opponent controls and special summon this card, and if you do, negate the targeted monster's effect until the end of this turn. And you can only use one Jester of Despia effect per turn, and only once that turn, because if you got both of the effects, it'd be just absolutely broken. We then play 3 copies of Despian Tragedy. You can play 2 copies of this card, but I really like the 3rd copy of it, and it's come up a lot in playtesting that I really liked the 3rd copy. And it has the ability, if this card is sent to the graveyard or banished by a card effect, then you can add a Despia monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of this card. And you can banish this card from the graveyard and then target a branded spell or trap in the grave and set it to your field, and you can only use either effect of this card once per turn. This card is literally the searcher for the searcher, which is really good, and can also recycle branded fusion and set it back to your field, but it's balanced because you can only get either of the effects per turn. We then play a single copy of Dramaturge. Dramaturge is a really awesome card, but you really only need a single copy of this card because it has the ability if a fusion, synchro, XZ, or link monster is special summoned, then you can target an effect monster on the field, negate its effect until the end of the turn. And if this card is in your hand or field, is used as fusion material and sent to the graveyard or banished, you can special summon this card, but you can only use either or of this effect per turn. We then play a single copy of Ad Libitum. Ad Libitum is a really awesome card because it has the ability that during your main phase, you can make all monsters currently on the field gain attack equals to their own level times 100 until the end of the opponent's turn, which can make some of your fusion monsters absolutely massive. And if this card is in your hand or field, is used as fusion material and is sent to the graveyard or banished, you can target one of your Despia monsters or a level 8 or higher fusion monster that's banished or in your graveyard and special summon it back to your field, which is a awesome effect that you can basically bring back Mirror Jade or any of your other crazy powerful fusion monsters that you play. We then play a single copy of Despian Comedy, which can actually help you out of a lot of funny situations because it's an awesome hand trap that when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a face-up Despia cards you control, quick effect, you can discard this card to negate the effect, which is really awesome. This card adds a little bit of added protection into this deck. It also has the ability, if this card is in your graveyard, quick effect, you contribute a fusion monster to special summon this card, but you can only use either or this effect per turn. We then play 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz. This card is in here because it's super poly with legs, and it's used for a lot of different of our fusion monsters, which is really awesome for this card. I absolutely love this card's artwork, and it's just a really amazing card. We then play a single copy of Spriggan's Kit. You really only need a single copy of this card because it has the ability that if you have a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as a material on your field or in your grave, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is normal or special summon, you can add to your hand one of your branded spell or traps that is banished or in your deck or graveyard, and then place a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck, which is not that big of a deal because some of your cards you actually want to get on the bottom of the deck to be able to get them out of your hand. So this card is a really good card to be able to get the exact card you need as well. We then play 2 copies of Edgem Chain. Edgem Chain is really good because it works with Ferrite for patchwork, and it also has a really awesome ability that when this card declares an attack, you can add Edgem Chain from your deck to your hand. But the really awesome effect is if this card is sent from your hand or field to the graveyard, you can add a Ferrite for card card from your deck to your hand, which is usually going to be your copy of Fright for Patchwork that you're going to be searching to get you an additional +1 that will search Edgem Chain and a Polymerization, so you can go into some really, really awesome plays. We then play a single copy of the Light Hex Sealed Fusion, which is a really awesome one-of in this deck that helps us go for Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. Because when you use Branded Fusion, you're going to go for a single copy of this card and Fallen of Albaz to summon Albion, to then use Albion's effect to banish these two cards to go in for Red Eye's Dark Dragoon, which is really, really awesome. We then play 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom is really good in the deck because it helps you stop your opponent from going in for all sorts of different plays while you're establishing your crazy awesome field. And then we play 3 copies of Psyframe Gear Gamma. Psyframe Gear Gamma is a good 3-of, along with our single copy of Driver for the Gamma, to basically just stop our opponent while we're trying to fusion summon into our awesome boss monsters, especially while we're using Branded Fusion to make sure that Branded Fusion goes through. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial is really good in this deck to get the exact card you need to the graveyard when you need it, like Despia and Tragedy. We play a single copy of Called by the Grave. Called by the Grave is really good to be able to stop your opponent from hand trapping you, along with the copies of Gamma, so you make sure your plays go through. We play a single copy of the Despian Theater of the Branded. This card is basically a fusion spell that is also a field spell because it has the ability that during your main phase, you can fusion summon a level 8 or higher fusion monster from your X deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. And if a face-up non-fusion fairy monster you control leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect or is destroyed by battle, then you can target a level 8 or higher fusion monster in your graveyard and special summon it. And you can only use either effect of this card once per turn, but it's a really awesome card to be able to play in this deck because of that second effect. We already have plenty of fusion spells in this deck, but that second effect is really awesome. We then play 2 copies of Polymerization to work with the Fright for Patchwork and Edgem, but they're just really good in the deck because it gives you additional fusion spells in this particular deck to go in for some crazy awesome plays. And speaking of crazy cards, we're playing 3 copies of Branded Fusion. This card is literally going to shape the entire format and is one of the most broken cards I have ever seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it has the ability that lets you fusion summon a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as a material from your X deck by using 2 monsters from your hand, deck, or field as fusion materials, and you can't special summon monsters from the X deck except fusion monsters the turn you activate this card. This card is crazy powerful because it lets you go in for copies of like Mirror Jade, Albion, Lubellion, any of those really powerful fusion monsters this card lets you go for, and it's searchable by multiple cards in the deck, which makes this card absolutely crazy good. We then play 3 copies of Branded in Red. I did consider cutting this down to 2, but in playtesting, kind of like with Tragedy, it worked really well at 3, so I kind of just kept it at 3. And it's a really good card because it lets you target a Despia monster or Fallen of Albaz in the graveyard and add it back to your hand, and then it lets you fusion summon a level 8 or higher fusion monster from your X deck by banishing fusion materials listed on it from your hand or field, but it can't attack directly, which is not that big of a deal because you're getting a Despia card back to your hand, so you can then fusion summon if you want to. It's not mandatory that you have to fusion summon, but recycling cards like your Jester, Tragedy, and all those really powerful monsters that you might need is really awesome with this card. We then play 3 copies of Branded Opening, which is also one of the most broken cards in the deck because it lets you discard a card and then take a Despia monster from your deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it in defense position, which is just crazy powerful because you can special summon out your Jester or any of your other Despia monsters that you need off this card's effect, which is just really awesome. It does lock you into fusion monsters, but that's not that big of a deal because that's pretty much all we're summoning anyways. We then play 3 copies of Fright for Patchwork. Fright for Patchwork is really good because it gives you a +1. It lets you add an Edgem monster and a Polymerization from your deck to your hand, which is your Edgem Chain, and a copy of Polymerization, which is really awesome to be able to grab those 2 really awesome cards in this deck. This card also adds a lot of consistency to the deck, so you always have a fusion spell rolling. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're just going to be playing 3 traps in this deck, and there's going to be 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. I chose to play Infinite Impermanence because I think it's a fantastic trap card to be able to play as a hand trap. Let you target a face-up monster your opponent controls and negate its effect. But you can change this out for Effect Veiler if you want to, and if you don't have Infinite Impermanences, because in the Albaz Strike structure deck, we did get a reprint of Effect Veiler, so that is an option for you guys. They kind of do the same thing, but this card is a little bit better than your Effect Veilers because it has the ability that also it can negate spells and traps that are activated in the same column as this card, which is really good. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. It only gets more broken from here. So we're going to be playing 2 copies of Mirror Jade. Mirror Jade is a really awesome boss monster that takes a Fallen of Albaz plus a Fusion Synchro XZ or a Link monster to summon this card. And you can only control 1 copy of this card, and once per turn, quick effect, you can send a fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard that mentions Fallen of Albaz as a material and banish a monster on the field. Also, you cannot get this effect during the next turn, which is a little bit balanced about this card, that basically you just extra foolish burial something from the extra deck and banish a card on the field that's a monster, which is just really good. And if a fusion monster card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you can destroy all monsters your opponent controls during the end phase of this turn, which this card is just absolutely crazy, because if it does leave the field, then you just get that crazy powerful effect. We then play 2 copies of Lubellion. Lubellion is a really good 2-of as well, because it's just a really good combo piece for the deck, because if this card is fusion summoned, you can discard a card to fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, except another copy of this card by shuffling the fusion materials mentioned on it into the deck from monsters on the field, graveyard, or face-up that's banished, which is really awesome because it just gets you all sorts of different plays while also recycling your cards. We then play 2 copies of Albion. Albion is a good card to be able to summon out if you're going to go for Dragoon, and also to send from the extra deck to the graveyard for your Mirror Jade's effect, which this card is basically a walking miracle fusion, because if this card is fusion summoned, you can fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, except another copy of this card, by banishing fusion materials listed on it from your hand, field, or graveyard, which is a really awesome effect. And speaking of Mirror Jade, by sending this card to the graveyard with Mirror Jade's effect, during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, then you can add to your hand or set a branded spell or trap directly from your deck, which is branded in red, branded fusion, branded opening, any of those really powerful spell cards you can just set to your field with this card's effect. We then play 2 copies of Masquerade the Blazing Dragon, which is pretty much a flare metal fusion monster, because it has the ability that when you control this fusion summon card, your opponent must pay 600 life points to activate cards and effects. And if your opponent controls a Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, XZ, or Link monster while this card's in your graveyard, quick effect, you can just special summon this card back to the field, but banish it when it leaves the field. This card is absolutely crazy and a definite 2-of in my build. We're then going to be playing 2 copies of Guardian Chimera. Guardian Chimera is a really powerful card for this deck, because it has the ability, it takes 3 monsters with different names to fusion summon this card, and it must be fusion summoned only using monsters from your hand or field, with at least 1 monster from each your hand and your field. And if this card is fusion summoned by a spell effect, it has the ability that you can draw cards equal to the number of cards used as a material for this card from the hand, which is really good, because if you use 2 cards, you get to draw 2 cards, which is really awesome. So it just replaces the cards you used as fusion material that you used from your hand. And if you do, destroy cards your opponent controls up to the number of cards used as a material that were from the field. So it also pops cards on the field and is a 3,300 attack point monster. It also has another effect that while polymerization is in your graveyard, your opponent cannot target this card with cards or effects. So this card is really insane and a really good boss monster. We then play a single copy of Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, because it's easy to go into with our copy of Albion, and just a really good walking negate and just a really awesome boss monster. We're playing a single copy of the Despia level 8 monster. This card is really good because it lets you just go for any Despia monster, but let's say light or dark monster to go into this card. And then during the main phase quick effect, you can change the attack of all monsters currently on the field to 0 until the end of the turn, except level 8 or higher fusion monsters, which all we're playing pretty much is level 8 or higher fusion monsters anyways, which is really good just to help you go in for game. We're then playing a single copy of Despian Proskelion. Roskelion is a really good boss monster as well for this deck. I feel like one copy is really good for this deck because during the main phase, quick effect, you can target a Fusion, Synchro, Izzy, or Link monster in your opponent's graveyard and banish it, or you get to special summon it to your field, which is really awesome that you can basically just Monster Reborn one of your opponent's monsters to your field. And then while this card when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack or defense, whichever was higher, which is really, really good. We then play a single copy of Predaplant Dracostapalia because it can put Preda counters on cards, and then when it has a Preda counter on it, it can negate that monster's effect and drop it to a level 1, which is really good. And then finally, I'm playing my own personal deck, which is the first Dark Lord. The first Dark Lord is a really awesome card because it takes 3 fairy monsters, which all of our Despia main deck monsters are. So this card is super easy to summon out to your side of the field as a 4,000 attack point monster. And then during the main phase quick effect, you can pay 1,000 life points to special summon a fairy monster from your hand or graveyard in defense position, which gets you a fusion material back on the field. Also, your opponent cannot target fairy monsters you control with card effects, so it gives a blanket protection to a lot of your main deck monsters. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It was a really awesome deck, and it's super fun to be able to play. You guys, if you haven't played this deck, you definitely should, because this deck is definitely going to be the best deck of the format with just how powerful the Fallen of Albaz and Despia archetypes are, especially with the Albaz Strike structure deck. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can come part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.